kui vaja on Ukrainal seda, siis Eesti nii-öelda saab selle inimeste ülesleidmise ja Ukrainale üleandmisega ka hakkama, et me suures pildis teame, kus kohas need isikud asuvad, mida nad teevad. Väga paljud, suurem osa neist käib tööl, neil on elukoht Eestis olemas.
This is my video update on this Sunday midday, December the 24th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with what is happening in Yemen. We have a bunch of stories to discuss with regards to Yemen. The first story is actually good news. And according to Al Jazeera, we have a ceasefire in the 9-year-long war in Yemen. Yemen warring parties commit to ceasefire. UN-led peace process, says envoy. Rival groups commit to new ceasefire and engage in UN-led peace process to end the 9-year war, says UN Special Envoy for Yemen. So the Saudi-backed Yemeni government and the Iran-aligned Houthis, they have agreed to a ceasefire and a series of meetings in order to get to a long-term peace and end the 9-year war in Yemen. A terrible war in Yemen, which now looks like it is heading towards a peace, which is good news. Iran and Saudi Arabia working together to end the war in Yemen. Very, very good news there. And we have news that the Biden White House, upon seeing their OPG coalition, Operation Prosperity Guardian, seeing that coalition crumble, with Spain and France and other countries pulling out of this coalition, which was at a minimum tasked with safeguarding ships passing through the Red Sea, and at the other end, at a maximum, was going to be a coalition to attack Yemen and possibly Iran. This OPG operation has crumbled, is crumbling, and now we are getting reports that the Biden White House, they actually approached Iran and asked Iran for help with the Houthis. An unbelievable claim if it is true. According to the Iran Foreign Affairs Minister, Americans asked us to advise Yemen not to do anything against American and Israeli interests. We told them that we never ordered them to stop their attacks. There are also reports which claim that Iran told the Biden White House that if Iran were to approach the Houthis and try to get them to stop the blockade in the Red Sea, which has turned into a very, very successful blockade. If Iran was to contact the Houthis, well, what they would need from the United States is they would need the United States to tell the Israelis to put an end to the war in Gaza. So that was various reports. Those were various reports. I cannot confirm these reports, which claim that Iran did tell the United States, stop what you're doing in Israel, and we'll tell the Houthis to stop what they're doing in the Red Sea. So if all of this is true, that's pretty incredible. That is amazing news, actually. This is such a huge L for the United States, such a huge embarrassment for the Biden White House. It really is a huge embarrassment for the Biden White House. All of these warships, aircraft carriers, missiles worth millions and millions of dollars. All of this was brought to its knees by Yemen, by the Houthis, and some cheap drones, I guess you could say. Drones costing a couple of $1,000s. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And while all of this is taking place, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, the United Nations, they get together and they broker a peace to end the 9-year war in Yemen, or it looks like they're going to broker a peace to end the 9-year war in Yemen. An incredible story. An incredible story. And the express.co.uk, not my favorite publication, but boy, did they put out an interesting article connected to what is happening in the Red Sea with Operation Prosperity Guardian. The title of their article reads, Joe Biden warned, no one takes him seriously as EU brutally snubs the US. France, Spain, and Italy have all announced their withdrawal from the US command structure for Operation Prosperity Guardian. And the Express Co. UK says US President Joe Biden has been warned that no one takes him seriously as a military operation in the US collapses due to the withdrawal of European countries from its command structure. France, Spain, and Italy will announce their withdrawal from the US command structure for Operation Prosperity Guardian, adding that they will only conduct further maritime operations under the command of NATO and or the European Union, not the United States. Wow. Wow. What a title from the UK publication Express. Joe Biden warned, no one takes him seriously as EU brutally snubs the US. So you got to wonder, have various EU countries finally realized that following the leadership of Joe Biden doesn't end too well? Have they finally realized that after Project Ukraine, after all of the EU countries followed Joe Biden into Project Ukraine, actually believing the Biden White House that Ukraine would defeat the Russian military and that within 3 months you would get regime change in Russia and remove the Putin administration? All the EU countries actually bought into that. They actually bought into that narrative from Biden and his team of foreign policy whiz kids, Sullivan and Blinken and Newland. You have to wonder, has Spain, Italy, and France, have they finally woken up to the fact that perhaps following Joe Biden is not the best thing to do, especially when it comes to foreign policy? So, the New York Times, they put out an article yesterday with the title, Putin quietly signals he is open to a ceasefire in Ukraine. Oh boy, these narratives, they just never end. Russia's running out of weapons. Russia is losing. Putin is sick. Putin wants a ceasefire. Oh boy. They never give up. They never give up with their narrative construction. So the New York Times, well, let me just read you some of this article, and then I'll give you my thoughts on this New York Times piece. President Vladimir V. Putin's confidence seems to know no bounds, buoyed by Ukraine's failed counteroffensive and flagging Western support. Mr. Putin says that Russia's war goals have not changed. Addressing his generals on Tuesday, he boasted that Ukraine was so beleaguered that Russia's invading troops were doing what we want. We won't give up what's ours, he pledged, adding dismissively, if they want to negotiate, let them negotiate. But in a recent push of back-channel diplomacy, Mr. Putin has been sending a different message. He is ready to make a deal. Mr. Putin has been signaling through intermediaries since at least September that he is open to a ceasefire that freezes the fighting along the current lines, far short of his ambitions to dominate Ukraine. Two former senior Russian officials close to the Kremlin and American and international officials who have received the message from Mr. Putin's envoys say. So Putin wants to freeze the conflict, according to two former Russian officials, as well as American and international officials. Who are these officials? Who are these former Kremlin officials? Well, as the critical drinker often states in his videos, don't know, don't care. Don't know, don't care. Who are these anonymous former officials who claim that Russian President Vladimir Putin wants to freeze the conflict? Freeze the conflict. He's winning so much that it's time for him to start losing, right? He's winning so much that it's time for Putin to lose, to freeze the conflict, and to get a little losing in there. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. Let's see here. What else does the New York Times say? Because this article is very, very heavy with projection. And I think this article is a type of psyop. Anyway, the New York Times, they say a little further down in this article, in the past 16 months, Mr. Putin swallowed multiple humiliations, embarrassing retreats, a once friendly warlord's mutiny before he arrived at his current state of relaxed confidence. All along, he waged a war that has killed or maimed hundreds of thousands while exhibiting contradictions that have become hallmarks of his rule. Yeah. Putin has swallowed a whole lot of humiliations. A whole lot of humiliations. Let's see. Not only was he humiliated with the siege of Kiev and the great Kherson and great Kharkiv counteroffensive, very humiliating for Putin. Very humiliating, the siege of Kiev. He was also humiliated with the, let me try to think, with the ghost of Moscow. Remember the ghost of Moscow? That was humiliating for Russia and for Putin. How about the spring, summer, winter, fall Russian counteroffensive that offended me and offended you and offended everybody? How about the catastrophic failure of the Russian spring counteroffensive? That was humiliating. That was very humiliating for Putin. Or let's see. Remember the time when Putin spoke to the European Parliament, the EU Parliament, and Putin said that the U.S.'s economy is in tatters. In tatters. Remember that? Remember that speech? And then he said that the U.S. economy is in such tatters that they're taking chips from washing machines and using them for the fighter jets and for the tanks and for the drones that they give to Kiev. Remember that speech? That was pretty humiliating for the Putin. Remember when the Putin met with Xi Jinping, and then Xi Jinping, he left. He went back to Beijing, and Putin had a press conference, and the reporter asked Putin what he thinks about Xi Jinping, and Putin said he's a dictator. Remember that? And Lavrov was like sitting in the audience, like front row, and he was just like, oh, I can't believe he said that Xi's a dictator. Remember that? That was humiliating for the Putin. Very humiliating. Very, very humiliating. Or how about that trip to, where was it? To Vilnius, where Putin was invited to meet with NATO members at the NATO summit. And Putin arrived in Vilnius only to be isolated by all NATO members. And Putin was wearing the green outfit. And you got the photo of Putin just kind of sitting there by himself, very upset because he was being snubbed by the other NATO members. That was humiliating for the Putin. That was very humiliating for the Putin. Or how about the Russian economy? How humiliating is that? 3.5% growth. 3.5% growth. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You could do better. You could do better than that. Just because you have 50,000 sanctions against you from the collective West, it's no excuse to only register a 3.5% growth. Come on, that's pretty humiliating. Oh, I'm trying to think of other instances of Putin swallowing humiliation. Didn't he once say something like Russia needs to do, or the EU needs to do a 360-degree turn or something like that? Anyway, the article. The article then says, under the heading, Early Talks. Mr. Putin first explored peace talks in the early weeks of the war, but they fell apart after Russia's atrocities in Ukraine came to light. Then, in the fall of 2022, after Russia's embarrassing retreat from northeastern Ukraine, the great Kharkiv counteroffensive, Mr. Putin again sent messages to Kiev and the West that he would be open to a deal to freeze the fighting, American officials say. No mention of Boris Johnson's trip to Kiev. No, it was these atrocities that derailed a ceasefire, not Boris Johnson. No, it wasn't Bojo. No way. Many in the West are skeptical of a ceasefire because they say Mr. Putin would rearm for a future assault. President Edgars Rinkēvičs of Latvia argued in an interview that Mr. Putin was committed to war because he dreams of reestablishing the empire. They never honored any agreements, Mr. Rinkēvičs said of the Russians, and they have violated them immediately when they saw it was convenient. Absolutely, I agree with the president of Latvia. The Russians, they pulled out of, or they manipulated Minsk 1, they manipulated Minsk 2, they manipulated the agreement for NATO not to move one more inch to the east. They manipulated that agreement as well. And the grain deal, who can forget the grain deal? The Russians manipulated that as well. The Russians refused to turn on SWIFT bank access for their own Russian agricultural bank. And the Russians, they're always manipulating their deals when it's convenient for them, as the Latvian president says. So look, this article, first off, this article is projection. This article is a whole lot of projection, and it's a long article. It's a whole lot of projection. Basically, what the New York Times put together is Russia wants a ceasefire. What they really want to say is that the Biden White House, the collective West, they need a ceasefire. But they project it onto Russia. So that's the first point that I want to make about this article. This is an article which exposes the fact that the collective West is desperate for a ceasefire, absolutely desperate to freeze the conflict. They want to freeze the conflict really, really bad, like really bad, and they're projecting all of that onto Putin and onto Russia. The other part of this article, the other goal of this article, in my opinion, is that it's a type of psyop. I think that what this article is meant to do is it's meant to cause some doubts and some infighting in the Kremlin. The New York Times puts out this article which claims that it's spoken to former Russian officials who claim that Putin is using back channels to press for a freeze to the conflict. And I think that the New York Times is hoping that various people in the Kremlin will read this article, will believe this article. They won't, but they're hoping that various officials, maybe even military officials, will believe this article and they're going to say, man, Putin, what is he doing? Is he out of his mind? He wants to freeze the conflict now? What about Odessa? What about the Black Sea? What about all these plans that we have? What is he doing? And they're hoping that this will lead to some sort of dispute and palace intrigue and perhaps a regime change. I think that's the ultimate goal of this article. It's pretty pathetic, actually. But look, it's the New York Times and probably some three-letter agencies trying their best to cause some disruption in the Kremlin and to try and make it seem like Putin wants this freeze, even though Russia is winning without a doubt. Russia has won. They want to make it seem like Putin is ready to give up, and so maybe they can get someone to overthrow the Putin. That's it. That's what I think this article is about. And Newsweek, they put out an article, actually an interview with Stoltenberg, where Stoltenberg, the NATO head honcho, he has declared victory. He says that NATO won this war. Yeah, he declared victory, Stoltenberg. How about that? Stoltenberg, NATO has won. He said that Putin suffered a big strategic defeat in Ukraine war. How about that? Victory, according to Stoltenberg. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has declared that Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine resulted in a strategic defeat for President Putin, asserting that Russia has lost Ukraine forever. Stoltenberg's statement came on the 666th day of battle. No coincidence there. Stoltenberg's statement came on day 666 of the conflict, with NATO leader saying that Russia failed to achieve its war aims, highlighting the high cost of its military efforts since the initial full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 22nd, 2022. Stoltenberg, in a conversation with German news agency DPA on Friday, stated that Russia's invasion aimed to prevent Ukraine's alignment with NATO and the European Union, but it has had the opposite effect. The Secretary General noted that Ukraine is now closer than ever to Western institutions, marking a big strategic defeat for Russia. So on day 666, Stoltenberg has declared that Putin failed. He was defeated in this conflict. NATO won. NATO won. How about that? Another victory for NATO. Another victory for NATO. We should give Stoltenberg a big fat bonus. Stoltenberg deserves a huge bonus for leading NATO towards victory. On day 666. Unbelievable stuff. You can't make this stuff up. How's that for narrative construction there? To just declare that you won the war. We won. We won. It's over. We won. Let's move on to the next conflict. Stoltenberg, huh? So the Finnish defense minister, Mr. Antti Häkkänen, he said that we are heading towards a new Cold War. Actually, it seems like he seems to take issue with Stoltenberg's declaration of victory. The Finnish defense minister said, "Now I think that in the US and in NATO countries, almost everyone knows that this is the end of the last 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union. Now we're going into some kind of a new Cold War." And the Finnish defense minister, he all but admitted that Russia had won this conflict. He didn't come out and say it, but that was pretty much what he was implying in this article and in this declaration, that we're heading towards a new Cold War. Russia's on their way to victory, and so it looks like we're going to have to put up another Iron Curtain, but this time it's the collective West that is putting up the Iron Curtain. So that is the statement from the Finnish defense minister, and also Czech President Pavel. He also said that that 2024 will bring some significant developments in the conflict. The indications so far are that it will not be in the best sense of the word as we would like it to be. Pavel admitting that Russia has won this conflict. Without saying Russia has won this conflict, it's Pavel's way of saying that Russia has won this conflict. And the German publication Bild. Should we go to the lake, everyone? Let's walk to the lake, the Salt Lake. German publication Bild, they are saying that Russia may attempt to attack Europe next winter, according to European intel sources. Those European intel sources. They do such a good job, those European intel sources. They got it right when it came to Russian weapons, and they got it right when it came to Russia's strategy in the conflict with Ukraine. They got it right when it came to Putin's many heart attacks and ailments. Those European intel sources, they're always 100% spot on. Now they got it right with Nord Stream. They got it 100% spot on with Nord Stream and Gilligan and the Andromeda. Now they are saying that Russia is going to attack Europe. European intelligence suggests that Russia may launch an attack on Europe during the winter of 2024-2025 if the United States finds itself without a leader following the 2024 U.S. presidential election. Wow. If the U.S. is without a leader, then Russia is going to attack Europe. You know that in a month or two, what Bild is going to say is that Russia is going to attack Europe if the leader of the United States is Trump. That's what they're inching towards. That's the narrative that they want to construct. Put money on it. That is the narrative that they want to get out there. If Trump wins the election, then Putin's going to attack Europe. We can't have that. We need, I think I can cross. We need Bidenopolis for another 4 years. If it's Trump, then Putin's going to attack Europe. By the way, Biden signed off on a record U.S. military budget. The amount of the budget, $886.3 billion. Wow. And in this budget, there's only $300 million for Ukraine. And the $300 million is basically for contracts with U.S. weapons producers who will then give those weapons to the Elensky regime. $300 million. Let's see here. We can do some, I don't know if these are pre-clown worlds or not. I don't know. Let's talk about the mobilization effort. This is not a pre-clown world. Let's go this way. So the Ukraine mobilization effort, actually, let's go that way. The Ukraine mobilization effort, well, it's not going so well. It's not going well at all. We are getting reports from various Ukrainian officials that things are so bad that in 2024, what's going to most likely happen is that we're going to need a total mobilization in Ukraine. Ukraine is likely to resort to a total mobilization next year in a bid to contain Russia. Ukraine officer Vasily Samovar, who commands the aviation and air defense forces of the 3rd Separate Storm Brigade, told a local Dnipro TV channel on Saturday. And so this military official said that the Ukrainians should prepare for total mobilization and a cold winter. The next year will unfortunately be much harder than 2023 and 2022 combined. So 500,000 soldiers is what Elensky wants to mobilize, and they can't find it. They cannot find those numbers. And so with each passing day, we're getting more and more stories saying that Ukraine is going to need a complete, total mobilization of the entire society, which is not good at all. And Estonia said they're going to help out with the mobilization, at least with regards to Ukrainians who fled Ukraine and are now living in Estonia. Estonia said that if Ukraine decides to sign an agreement with Estonia in order to, I guess, extradite, to send back the Ukrainians in Estonia, to send them back to Ukraine so they can get sent to the front lines. Estonia said if Ukraine wants to sign that agreement, Estonia's game. They'll do it. They will do it. Estonian Interior Minister says it could help with mobilization of Ukrainians in Estonia, according to Ukrainska Pravda. Estonian Interior Minister Lori Lanamets had said that Estonia is ready to help Ukraine mobilize its citizens if necessary. It's a pretty incredible article, actually. That's some friend of the Ukrainian people, Estonia. That's some real good friend that Ukraine has there. Let's see here. The source of this reporting from Ukrainska Pravda is the Estonian newspaper Postimees, European Pravda. The details, the minister said that there are about 7,500 Ukrainian citizens of conscription age living in Estonia. He noted that many of them are not liable for military service according to Ukrainian legislation. Single parents, parents of at least 3 children, parents of children with disabilities, and people who are caring for a loved one are also not liable for mobilization. In other words, there are quite a few criteria according to which a person is not subject to conscription, explained Lanamets. Lanamets said that under international law, Ukraine cannot call up Ukrainians living in Estonia for military service, as this requires an agreement between the two countries. He intends to officially inform the Ukrainian authorities that if they want to conscript Ukrainian citizens in Estonia, then the country is ready to conclude such an agreement with Ukraine. Estonia will not stand aside. We are happy to sign such an agreement and help Ukraine. We know where these people live in Estonia. We are ready to assist in bringing these people from Estonia to Ukraine if they need it, the Interior Minister added. That is about as evil as it gets. That is about as evil as it gets, man. Wow. Estonia. If Ukraine wants to sign an agreement, we're happy to send back the Ukrainians so that they can be sent to the front lines. So we're getting reports of Ukrainians fleeing the country, like just packing up and leaving, like high-level journalists, officials, parliament members, even aid workers. There was a report yesterday that how many? 10 Ukrainian volunteers, aid workers, actually fled the country. They went to the UK. They said they were going to the UK in order to get humanitarian aid. So they made their first trip to the UK. They brought back the aid. They took photos, videos, everything was legit. So then they made their second trip to the UK. They got permission from the government to make a second trip to the UK in order to bring back more humanitarian aid. And they never came back. They just vanished. probably somewhere in the UK. Maybe they're hanging out with the one-time defense minister, Reznikov. One of Reznikov's many mansions that I'm sure he bought with all of the U.S. money. But we also had a journalist who went to the European Union headquarters to cover the EU meetings that were taking place in Brussels last week. And this journalist actually is a very popular, from what I understand, a very popular TV host, Alexei Pechyi. He decided to stay in Brussels. He went to Brussels to cover the accession talks, the approval of the accession talks for Ukraine. And he decided to stay in Brussels. He didn't come back. And he actually posted on social media that he's not going to come back. He said that for him, it's better to remain in the EU, in Europe, and to try and help Ukraine from Europe, from Brussels, rather than go back to Ukraine and continue to host his TV show or whatever he has, his news show. And of course, people in Ukraine are not buying it. They know that this guy is basically leaving Ukraine because he's afraid of mobilization, the conflict, conscription, and all of these things. He understands that Ukraine has lost and that Russia has won. And so he's getting out. He's leaving. This is salt right here, huh? Yeah. No flamingos out today. So let's do one more story, and then we'll get to a clown world. And this story is connected to Putin's New Year's greetings, which the Russian president does every year. He sends out greetings to world leaders. And this year, he is only going to send out New Year's greetings to leaders of friendly countries. I think he did the same thing in 2022 as well. Unfriendly countries, they're not going to get any New Year's greetings. That's what Peskov said in a statement. And actually, the article via RT highlights Putin's anger in 2022 with Angela Merkel, who was on the list to get New Year's greetings, and then Putin took her off the list because of the comments she made with Minsk, where she said that the Minsk agreements were all about buying time for NATO so they could rearm Ukraine to fight Russia. So, yeah, New Year's greetings only for friendly countries. And Putin wants to freeze the conflict, right? According to the New York Times. He wants to freeze the conflict and go back to the way things were. But a bunch of bullocks from the New York Times. PSYOP bullocks. All right, let's do a clown world. And this clown world is courtesy of Germany. And a German economic advisor proposes a tax increase to fund Project Ukraine. Monica Schnitzer's call for a Ukraine surcharge comes as the government's approval ratings hit record lows. Yeah, Olaf Scholz, Baerbock, Habeck, no one likes them. Their approval ratings are at like the basement, underneath the basement, underground of the basement. That's where their approval ratings are. But no reverse gear. No reverse gear. And the German government, they're actually thinking about adding an Elensky tax. Britain should tax citizens' incomes more in order to strengthen military aid to Ukraine as support for the conflict ebbs elsewhere in the West. Monica Schnitzer, who chairs the German Council of Economic Experts, told the Rheinische Post on Saturday. And she's part of an economic advisory board, get this, known as the Five Wise Men. That's what this council is known as, the Five Wise Men. And the five wise men, they think that an Elensky tax is a good idea. in order to continue to fund Project Ukraine. Wow. Wow. Tax the Germans, tax the German citizens, so that the money can buy Elensky more homes, so that the money can enter those washing machines and spin round and round and round. And yeah, you're funding a conflict that everyone, like everyone now, has agreed is lost. But you want to actually tax your citizens in order to keep this thing going, in order to try and keep this thing going. That is absolutely pathetic. Pathetic. And what did Lavrov say just a couple of days ago when talking about the German leadership, the German government? What did Lavrov say? They're a bunch of thieves. He was talking about their plans to steal 800 million in Russian assets. But there you go. Lavrov proven right once again. All right, everybody, that's the video. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. 20% off. Use the code Christmas20. Take care.